Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So something screwy went on with my audio on the last, I think it was like 2 videos. One I didn't push up, one I did push up. It is always aggravating to me having to do a video over, especially when I think the video is right the first time around. Nevertheless, I'm going to do this video over and I'll just come up with a different way for you guys to hear the sound. George Galloway. So Galloway, I think I've said before, and I think I might have said in the other video, debate him at your peril. The man is a goddamn lion. Oftentimes, the anti-war left, and we get hit with this thing of these bleeding heart libs with these humanitarian reasons on why they want to go to war. The dead babies! Look at all the dead babies! There's a sea of dead babies! There are dead babies everywhere! He's a butcher! He's killing babies. We need to go in and we need to kill our own dead babies. We need to go in and murder a lot of people in order to protect those dead babies. That's what we need to do. And you kind of make this point of, yeah, but you understand, you're going after supposedly one guy, but in the pursuit of one guy, you're going to smash and kill a lot of other people. You're going to create horrors and hellish environments for a lot of other people. And when you take that disposition, that practical, pragmatic disposition, that's completely right. Based on our previous history, when we went into Iraq, it wasn't just Saddam Hussein that we got. We smashed that country to smithereens. Those sanctions that we were passing killed hundreds of thousands of children. Our actions in the world, even when they're put in these humanitarian frames, have negative and adverse consequences to the people who are living in those countries. It's not just about the individual, and it's not just about the government. They are real-world humanitarian concerns affiliated with you destroying a country. Nevertheless, we often get tied with this and saying that because you don't want war with that person, because you don't want to go in and smash that government to bits, because you're trying to be a man on the wall against us using our military boot in order to bash the heads in of somebody else, then you are somehow connected with and tied to this other government or this other regime. Even when you make that point of saying, this may be a bad guy, but just because he's a bad guy doesn't necessarily necessitate a war. It doesn't matter. They don't have either the intellectual curiosity or the intellectual honesty to say, okay, you're right. If we go into this, we're going to smash and kill a lot of people. And I can totally understand how you may not necessarily like the individual who's at the helm of that country. You may not necessarily like that government. You may not necessarily want to live in that country. And yet still, you don't necessarily want to destroy it and smash it to bits. Galloway gets hit with this question on the question of Iran. And at the time, Ahmadinejad was in office. I think this goes back to 2012. The reason why I'm showing this is because this argument is the exact same situation that takes place now with the Syria question. And even to some degree, still the Iran question. The Syria question being, well, Bashar al-Assad's a bad guy, and because Bashar al-Assad is a bad guy, we need to do something about him being a bad guy. Completely missing the point that we've been sitting in weapons and terrorists. We haven't all been skeptical of the terrorists that we've been sitting those weapons and arms to. And those things have ended up in the hands of ISIS, the people who we are supposedly there to fight. Again, negative consequences from our intervention. Listen to how he deals with this question. And this guy is surly, and this guy is being somewhat of a prick when he's answering the question. And I have to give him props for answering this question in a surly, hilarious way. And Brits have a certain way of going about asking questions that is fucking hilarious to me. I disbelieve that this was Oxford because these people are so dim-witted. But apparently it is Oxford. And there's a series of these questions where he's asked in this way. But listen to his response, because his response is emblematic of the anti-war response when they're getting hit with this particular stuff. And I would say his response is magnificent and his response is correct. Galloway, knocking away the Iran argument.
Shameful things that you've said or done in the length of your ignoble career, but there's one recent one that comes to mind which is unforgivable. When you were interviewing Mr. Ahmadinejad for Press TV, did you not see any moral double standards at all in exploiting the plight of the Palestinian people, which, you know, is a rightful cause, but at the same time having nothing to say in the defence of the secularists, females and minorities who are paying for the crime of wanting to be free in Iran? Do you have no sympathy, for example, for the Baha'is who are immiserated, oppressed and massacred in the tenfold for the supposed crime of being apostates to Shia Islam. And as a seasoned demagogue with a dubious moral compass, I'm sure your answer will be as vague and vapid as it ever has been. But I can assure you that whichever answer you give, history will be the judge of you and your record, and I, for one, will not buy into it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the welcome. I'm not sure how history will record you. Perhaps munificently. But one of the benefits of a long and very public political career, which you describe as ignoble, although it seems to have attracted.
By the way, I just want to make a point here. He's, again, just so we're clear, he's tying Galloway to the government of Iran. Now, he's doing it, again, in a surly way that Brits have a way to, putting a knife in people. Because of your ignoble career, all this stuff. But I'm just let him answer. I'm just making a point that this is the same argument that often takes place today. This is why historical context matters. To see how people were framing these arguments 4 years ago, 10 years ago, 100 years ago. And you find out that even though it may not necessarily be exactly the same, that they tend to rhyme in regards to the way that these things come up over and over again, and the way that the anti-war contingent is attacked. Let's let him answer. He gives it a magnificent answer.
Quite a lot of people to share some of my perspective is the fact that everything I have said and done is on the public record. On the public record in Hansard, over 25 years in Parliament, elected 6 times. That doesn't sound all that ignoble to me. And on the record on YouTube in 12,800 videos, none of which I put up myself. On the record on Google in millions of words, which I wrote myself. And if anyone cares to consult any of these records, they will not recognize the picture that you have painted. But let me concentrate on what I think is the nub of your question, which is Ahmadinejad. Ahmadinejad will cease to be the president of Iran in less than 6 months' time. In his neighborhood, that's a very unusual thing. The Prime Minister of Bahrain, which is currently butchering its democracy protesters using our weapons and gas, has been the Prime Minister of Bahrain since 1963. It's now 2012. He became the Prime Minister before the Beatles existed, and the Beatles are 40 years dead. He's the uncle of the king, who has the real power in Bahrain, a neighboring country. His family have ruled Bahrain for almost 300 years, since they were placed in power, taken actually from a different part of the region and placed in power in Bahrain by the British Raj more than 250 years ago. So it's unusual that Iran's president will cease to be the president. But what else is unusual is that Ahmadinejad was elected as the president of Iran. None of the leaders, especially of our best friends in the region, have ever been elected by anybody to anything. They're in power by virtue of the weapons that we gave them. Now, as should be obvious, I am not a supporter of the Islamic system in Iran. If I had a vote in Iran, it wouldn't go to Ahmadinejad. But I'm not an Iranian, and how Iran governs its affairs is the business of the people of Iran. Now, you talk about women, I can assure you, and if you don't believe me, just look at the television. that there are tens of millions of Iranian women support the Islamic Revolution and support its system. I don't myself, but they do, as watching television any Friday on the aforementioned Press TV, although you can't watch it in Britain, the land of the free, because it's been taken by the government off the Sky platform in the interests of liberty and freedom of expression, of course. You mention the Baha'is. I'll take your word for the immiseration of the Baha'is, although not the last time I looked. Most Baha'is in Iran are far from immiserated, but they are undoubtedly oppressed. I am against all oppression of any minority, whether religious or ethnic, or on grounds of sexual orientation or any other form. Don't try and blame me for the imperfections, faults, crimes of the Islamic Republic of Iran. My interests collide or elide with the Islamic Republic of Iran only in this regard. I don't want our country to go to war with Iran, that's all. I'm happy to support revolution in Iran, reform in Iran, agitation in Iran by Iranians for an Iranian agenda. But I will never support my country sending its bombs to fall on Iran and on Iranian people, where, by the way, those bombs will not discriminate between men and women, between secular and Muslim, between Baha'is or gays or straights or any other discrimination. The bombs will fall on all Iranians. And I'm against it. And I'm inviting you to be against it too.
That is the point. That's the point. I mean, I understand people like to make these arguments of, oh, he's a bad guy or this person's a bad guy. There are a lot of bad people, and we are friends with a lot of those bad people. And the fact is, when you drop those bombs are going to hit people who are not just bad people. They're going to hit all people across the board. There were 1 million people that died in Iraq. Let's say that number is inflated. Let's say it's 500,000. That is a massive amount of people that died in Iraq for them supposedly just to get Saddam Hussein. What about Libya? When they went after Gaddafi, they had terrorists to create this kind of fomentation, but you have slaves, Africans, being sold to slaves. They smashed that country to bits. I'm making the point that you are creating horrors around the globe, and you're completely ignoring those horrors as you lurch to the next horror. This was back in 2012 when we were still having this conversation about Iran today. And the same conversation, in some degree, is being had about Syria. At some point, we need to stop setting fires around the globe. When the anti-left is getting hit with this very specific argument of, how are you friends with this person? Or you're being an apologist for Assad, or you're a Putin puppet and all this other stuff. Nonsense. You're being a goddamn patriot. You want your military being used in this way. I don't want my cousin being used in this way as a tool of some kind of political imperialism. I don't want it. If those countries want to have their own revolution internally, God bless. Have at it. I don't want it to be something that we ourselves are dictating, we ourselves are controlling, or we ourselves are moving the pieces on. Fact is, people want to say something about Iran, talking about Iraq, that they have elections right now. Saddam Hussein was a bad guy. I would wager to you that the 1 million people that he killed, or that got killed in pursuit of taking Saddam out of that office, would prefer to be here. And I would wager to you that the people who are there now would say they didn't want the war. They didn't want you blowing their country to bits and destroying that country. Not to mention, the person who exceeded out that was Iran. Despite us destroying that country, and despite them having elections right now, Iran is a strong part of Iraq. Part of the lunacy of the 12-point or however many ever points ultimatum that the Trump administration gave was for them to leave Iraq. It was our influence. It was what we did that allowed them to get influence in Iraq. Look, the only point I'm saying here is whatever takes place in those countries need to be the ones who dictate those things, not us. We have caused fires in that area of the globe. You don't understand. Saddam Hussein was our guy. Bush at one point called him a monster, but at one point he was our monster. In one situation after the next. Iran, same thing. We destroyed the country, smashed it to bits because we wanted the oil, and we didn't necessarily want them in a democratic way to choose what they did with the oil. The reason we put in strongmen in those countries is because it's easier to work with strongmen than democracies. Those democracies may make other choices with the resources of those particular countries, and we don't like that. We like to cast that stuff as in being communistic because they decide they want to use the oil revenue for themselves, or they want to use whatever natural resource for themselves. No. Communistic is just the lens that we use in order to exploit and take their gains. That's all it is. We want oil. We need to get our hands on oil. It is far easier to deal with a dictator than it is to deal with a democratic republic that may make other choices with their oil. I'm just saying, that is the history of Western countries in that part of the globe. Galloway is right. Galloway is right. I hate redoing videos, but I wanted to redo this video because I thought he gave a magnificent argument, and that argument I wanted to be heard. So I'll leave it here. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. And I'll figure out what's going on with my audio and get it fixed. Thanks, guys.